You've heard me say this many times before, so I'll make it quick. 2 men, 2 houses, one built on rock, one built on sand. Winds, rain, storm. One house still standing, one guy standing amid a pile of rubble, wondering what went wrong. It's obvious what went wrong. You built your house on sand, dude. Sand is not conducive to a secure foundation. Duh. But this story, this parable, is about more than building codes. It's about faith and religions and churches. The house built on rock, the only house built on rock, is the Catholic Church. All other houses are built on the sand of pride, hubris, and men's own ideas. They are heresies and false religions. But there are some people who've built a house not just on the sand of their own ideas. Oh, they've built their houses on sand all right, but some of that sand belonged to other men. Behold my segue, roll open. Merry old England, 16th century. Henry VIII has sent the kingdom and the faith into spiritual and cultural tailspin by going against the Pope and the Church. We talked about Henry last time. He desperately wanted a son to be king after him, but tragedy just kept striking him. Rather than accept his cross, he took matters into his own hands. First, he got rid of his wife and got married again. Second, he did that again, and repeated this 4 more times, for a total of 6 wives. It's important to remember a couple of things about Henry's schismatic rebellion. First, it was happening at about the same time as the great continental European Protestant revolt. All these guys, Luther, Zwingli, Erasmus, they were doing their crazy Protestant protesting thing at the same time as Henry was divorcing and decapitating wives. Second, Henry wasn't really a Protestant like these guys. His beef with Rome was political more than spiritual. He didn't want to change the church's theology. In fact, he wrote a brilliant defense of the 7 sacraments against Martin Luther called The Defense of the 7 Sacraments Against Martin Luther. Henry wasn't really good at titles. Anyway, he didn't want a church with a new theology. He just wanted enough freedom to remarry and remarry and remarry, and you get the idea. But when a sheep, even a crowned sheep like a King Henry, for example, wants freedom, he has to chase away the shepherd. And with the chief shepherd, the Pope, kicked out, the English sheepfold was vulnerable, and the wolves came in and devoured them. The wolf we're talking about today is Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. Yep, you heard that right, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. And I'm not talking about no fake Anglican bishop, nope. This guy was a Catholic archbishop appointed by the Pope. Hey, just because the guy's infallible doesn't mean he can't make a few mistakes here or there, right? But I'm getting ahead of myself, so back to the story. Cranmer wasn't born an archbishop, duh. He was born in Nottinghamshire in 1489. His parents were pretty well off, but they weren't nobles or anything like that. John, the elder brother, inherited the family estate, while the younger brothers, Thomas and Edmund, considered becoming priests. This was a common thing at the time. Younger sons of well-off families who didn't have the estate to inherit needed to find something to do. They probably didn't have much of a vocation to the priesthood, but it was an indoor work with no heavy lifting type of thing and gave them a comfortable living. Wily men like Cranmer might be able to rise up the ranks of the clergy and get some real power too. Today, even the smartest historians don't know too much about Cranmer's early schooling. He probably attended the local grammar school. A grammar school is called a grammar school because the main focus of the curriculum was Latin grammar, but other subjects were also taught. Cranmer's father died when he was 12. 2 years later, he went to Jesus College at Cambridge University. For 8 years, he studied logic, classical literature, and philosophy, and came out with a Bachelor of Arts degree. He went right back into the university, studying humanists like Erasmus for the next 3 years. He received his master's degree in 1515 and was appointed to a fellowship of the college. Shortly after this, Thomas married a woman called Joan. Now, even though he wasn't a priest, the college didn't really like this all that much, and they stripped him of his fellowship. To support himself, he took a job as a reader. That's a senior researcher in the English college system at another college at the university. But his old college clearly thought a lot of him. When Joan died in childbirth, Cranmer was reinstated to his fellowship and started to study theology. By 1520, he had been ordained a priest, and the university made him one of their preachers. In 1526, he received his third degree, a Doctor of Divinity. A peaceful life of saying Mass, preaching to the students, and studying at the university wasn't what Cranmer was destined for, though. Cardinal Wolsey, who in addition to being a cardinal and all that, was also King Henry's chancellor. He was looking for people to be diplomats. He decided to go with a bunch of scholars from Cambridge, and one of the guys he picked up was Cranmer. He was sent to the embassy in Spain. It was around this time Henry and Cranmer met. They seemed to hit it off well. Letters from Cranmer describe Henry as the kindest of princes. Cranmer assisted Wolsey with the king's annulment proceedings against Catherine of Aragon, and Henry saw the up-and-coming churchman as someone potentially useful. In 1529, the plague came to England, and Cranmer got the heck out of Dodge, or rather Cambridge, rather than stay in the confined spaces of the cities. He went to live with relatives. While avoiding disease in the country, some of his buddies from Cambridge came to visit and asked him about the annulment issue. Cranmer had a cunning plan. The case in Rome wasn't going to go anywhere, so drop it and instead get input from respected university theologians from all over Europe. Yeah, right. We've heard that one before, haven't we? Can't get what you want from Rome, so go to a bunch of respected theologians and do an end run around. Henry liked the idea, however. I mean, what could go wrong? Someone's going to agree with him, right? He sent Cranmer to go meet with these European theologians and see what they had to say. Now remember, this was the middle of the Protestant revolt. At this point, respected theologian might as well have been shorthand for Protestant rebel in some places. And one of those places was Switzerland. Guess where Cranmer went? Yep, to the mountains of Switzerland. He met a guy called Simon Grynæus, a humanist and follower of Zwingli. If you've watched previous episodes, you know just how bad a humanist Zwingliite would be. It was through Grynæus that Cranmer made his first contacts with European reformers. By January 1532, Cranmer's star was definitely on the rise. He was appointed resident ambassador to the Holy Roman Empire. The Emperor Charles V, in addition to having an awesome first name, if I say so myself, traveled throughout his empire, and Cranmer had to follow the court as it moved. When it passed through the Lutheran city of Nuremberg, Cranmer saw firsthand the effects of the Protestant revolt. But he wasn't revolted by it. Far from it, actually. He met the leading architect of the Nuremberg reforms, Andreas Osiander. They became best buddies. Such good friends, in fact, Cranmer married Andreas's niece, Margaret. Now, this was a big deal, not just because Cranmer was supposed to be theologically Catholic, but also because he was, well, you know, a priest. Priests having mistresses wasn't unusual. This was a period of major corruption in the church, but they normally kept it on the down low. Cranmer didn't care, however. He was out and proud with it. In fact, he was already shifting to a more Lutheran position on many issues, including clerical celibacy. While Cranmer was following Charles, that's the Emperor Charles, not me. I would have told him to get lost. Anyway, While he was following the emperor, he was notified he'd been appointed Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, this was a big deal. The Archbishop of Canterbury was pretty much the head honcho of the church in England. And it was kind of a surprise. Cranmer wasn't a major player inside the English church, but he was popular with Henry and the English court, and that's why he got the job. The family of Anne Boleyn, Henry's current mistress at the time and future wife, wanted his support so Anne could marry Henry. Henry liked the idea of Cranmer as archbishop, so he supported it. The Pope's ambassador was under orders to do whatever he could to keep Henry happy in an attempt to avoid a schism. So he approved the appointment and Cranmer returned to England. Now, we know how all this ends. Badly, for everyone. Cranmer was ordained bishop on March 30th, 1533, and immediately started to work on an annulment for Henry. He presided over the kangaroo court trial that separated Henry and Catherine and baptized Henry and Anne's daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth. The Pope was furious, but he couldn't do much. He didn't do much because he was afraid he'd push England into schism. He had no idea just how bad things were or what kind of crazy Protestant theology Cranmer believed. England couldn't be pushed into schism. England had already crossed that line about 5 exits back. It was a year later in 1534, Cranmer showed his true colors. He replaced the old guard with his people, men who held his own theological views, or rather, the Protestant revolutionaries' theological views. During this period, England was riven with theological disputes. The Continental Revolution was reaching the shores of the Angel Isle, and debates raged. Cranmer was always happy to step in to settle a dispute, and was even happier to decide on the side of the revolutionaries. Orthodox Catholics weren't impressed with him, to put it mildly, but they had bigger problems. Parliament had passed laws formally breaking the church in England away from the Catholic Church, and the dissolution of the monasteries, that is, destroying their buildings and stealing all their stuff to pay for the king's debts, had started. But Cranmer was a clever old bird. He wanted to wait until Henry was dead before making too many changes to the structures of the Church of England. Remember, all Henry wanted was enough independence from Rome to keep marrying women until one of them gave him a son and the ability to steal stuff from Catholics. It's not like he was some crazy Lutheran with wackadoodle theology. Anyway, Henry died in 1547, and his son Edward became king. Now Cranmer started to move. The Protestant wing of the Anglican Church had the power and authority, using homilies, publications, and the infamous Book of Common Prayer. Cranmer made major changes to the Anglican Church. Now a new liturgy was set in English, and the doctrines of the Eucharist, clerical celibacy, the use of images in worship, the veneration of saints, and more were radically reformed. By 1553, Henry's eldest and legitimate daughter, Queen Mary I, was on the throne. She was 2 things: Catholic and very, very, very upset. She put Cranmer on trial for treason and heresy. Verdict, boom, guilty. Sentence, boom, death. There's a reason the Protestants call her Bloody Mary, just for the record. But to be fair, it's not like Cranmer didn't deserve it. His efforts and policies had not only led thousands then and millions now away from the one true faith, but he'd also supported the king's brutal executions, murders, and dissolutions of the monasteries. And it's not like he was immediately executed. He was kept in jail and put under pressure to recant his heresy, and he did recant it, several times in fact. He made himself right with God and the church, it seems, and then changed his mind on the day of his execution, recanting his recantations and ultimately dying outside of the church. The Church of England, of course, calls him a martyr. Point of view, I guess. So what can we learn from Cranmer? I mean, it's not like we'll ever be in a place to travel around with emperors with awesome names and influence major political decisions, right? Here's the thing. Cranmer should have been another St. Thomas Becket. Becket was Archbishop of Canterbury and refused to go along with the king's evil policies. He stood up to the king and got killed for it, but then changed the king's mind with his death. Even if Cranmer couldn't have done that, he could have at least done the right thing. Sure, he'd have died, but he died anyway. He would have died a martyr for the Catholic faith like St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher and many other English martyrs of this period. But he chose a different path. Rather than choosing to stand against the evil of men on the side of God and the angels, he gave in to the temptations of the easy life, a comfortable life, influenced by the easy man-made theology of Protestantism. He took the path of least resistance. And one time he did show some courage, right before his death, he managed to stand up and do the wrong thing. Martyrdom isn't easy. That's pretty obvious though. And this may be the lesson we can take from this. The martyrdom experienced by men like Becket, More, and Fisher, and which Cranmer wouldn't accept, might not be as hard as the martyrdom we have to face. It's no secret things aren't going well in the Western world today. The Catholic faith is under attack from the left and the right, and Catholics are getting marginalized and pushed out of the public square with ridicule and mockery and little petty pressures and penalties. But we're not being killed. What we're experiencing is a red martyrdom, a martyrdom of blood. We are experiencing a white martyrdom, a martyrdom of 1,000 tiny little social pressures and ridicule, or maybe a green martyrdom, where we pay with cash, not our lives. We need to stand up in the face of these things and push them back. We need to live lives of holiness and frequent reception of the sacraments. It's no good thinking, well, when it comes down to it, I'll die for the faith, so I can be kind of wishy-washy here. I mean, if it were a life and death thing, of course I'd do the right thing, but for now, I'm just gonna sit down and shut up. Nope, doesn't work that way. All the martyrs, without exception, lived lives of great holiness. Martyrdom was a grace they were granted, as well as the grace of final perseverance. The grace of final perseverance isn't one that we can merit. It has to be given. That should scare every one of us and cause us to take a very serious look at our own lives and our own actions, especially now. We don't know when we will be called to witness for the gospel with our lives. Martyrdom doesn't happen at the end of our life here on earth. It begins every day when we wake up and decide to die to ourselves so that we can live in Christ. So that's what I'm saying to you today, and what I say every week. Stay holy, my friends. Join me next time where I will be talking about William Tyndale, a man who didn't get along with Henry VIII at all. But then, who did? I'm Charles Hornbacher. I'm not the Holy Roman Emperor, but I've got just the same chance of being holy as he did. And this has been Houses Built on Sand.